Hello YouTube, welcome back to the garage. Now you can probably spot that this isn't a BSA or a Harley Davidson. It's my 2CV. One of the great loves of my motoring life. I've had them for a very long time. And this one I rebuilt about, 15 months ago for a specific purpose, which came and went. And then to be honest, it's been sat back for a bit over the winter. Now when I rebuilt it, I put new suspension can cups inside the suspension cans because the old suspension was really worn. This went down to grease with me through the Balkans and it was worn before it went, and the roads in the Balkans, let's say, it didn't do it any good. So when it came back, the suspension was terrible, crashing, banging, noisy, clearly just pretty worn. So I put new cups in it. And when I fitted them, I thought, these are quite firm. But I thought, well, they'll break in. And I will show you that in episode 3 of this 3-part video series. I drove the car about for a month or so, a couple of months. The weather turned bad, so I put it away for the winter. And when I went to take it out, and the suspension was almost solid, which I will pull you back and try and demonstrate here. So it's gone from tight to super tight. I think I know why, which is why I'm going to record this little series of videos. So this first one is going to be how to remove and replace your main suspension cans. Video 2 is how to find out externally the things that go wrong and how to replace them, and also how to take a can apart. Video 3 will be how to put it all back together again, and also stripping of these to find out what's gone wrong with these. So if you're interested in 2CV suspension, stick around, might be interesting. Either way, I'm going to film it, so let me just cut you off for a second, recompose the shot and show you the car. Now, those who know 2CVs, and even those who don't, have probably heard of their famed subtle bump absorbing suspension. Now, I hope you can see that, but that ain't absorbing anything. It's actually got worse, as I say, since it's been in storage. It's impossible to drive like this, and that's why the cans have got to come off. So what we're going to do is we're going to jack the car up, put it on stands, and then I will show you one half, because it's quite difficult to get it all in. It's quite a cramped garage with a car and 2 motorbikes in it. I'm going to show you one half of the removal, because both sides are exactly the same on this car. I'll explain the difference if you've got a genuine chassis. And then the can will come off, and then I'll fit the ones I've got ready to go on. And that'll be the end of this video. Part 2 will go into more detail as to what to look for, how to sort it out, as I said. So I'll turn you off, I'll jack it up, I'll put it on stands, I'll try and get some decent lighting onto the bit we're going to work on. Right, we're in the air, and I've illuminated everything as best I can. Now, quick word of about safety. I've got a block of wood on top of my stand, which is not good practice. However, I'm not intending getting underneath the car. I will be at all times outside of the car, using my arms to work inwards. It isn't safe, really, to get underneath the car if you've got something like wood between it and the jack and under the stand. As I say, I have no intention of endangering myself by getting underneath the car. If I had to get underneath the car, I would use higher axle stands. It's as simple as that. Right, both wheels are off the ground, and the first thing I'm going to do is remove the shock absorber, which gives a better view of what we're doing. So, put my specs on because I can't see anything without them anymore, because what size these are now? No. $18 on this one. Right. So, as I say, at some points I will probably end up getting in front of you. I apologise for that, but it is difficult and cramped in here. So hopefully, it won't be for long. Wow, that's tight. Oh my word. Oh, I've forgotten to tighten them up this well. Right, so you get the idea. I'll turn you off while I actually undo them, because it'll be 5 minutes of scrabbling about, and I'll bring you back when I'm bringing them off. Right, the nuts are off. I just noticed I've got a small split in my suspension shock absorber bush. Another one there, which I don't remember before. No. So this one's a little bit tight, pre-tapped it. There we go. Now, it often needs considerable more leverage than that to get it off, but that's not bad. So we can now see what we're dealing with. So I will reposition you and we'll start talking about the actual removal itself. Right, hopefully you can see the whole assembly now on this end. So we have our knife edges and the tie rod end, which is circular in this case, rather than square edged. We will look into that closer in episode 2. We have the tie rod screwing into it. We have a rubber boot, a 46mm nut, another 46mm nut, and then inside, this is the chassis. Inside there, a sleeve which is threaded at each end that these nuts sit on, and then a rubber bush, and then our pot. Now, the quickest way, and the way I'm going to do it, is to leave these on, because I know they're good, that's new. I know they're well looked after, they're well greased, the pins are new, that's new, everything's good. So I just want to change the cans. If you wanted to change the whole lot, including these eyes, and inspect them, there are two clips either side, and then the pin can be driven through and removed. It can also be done after the tie rod's been split if you wish. That's entirely up to you. Now, this is an SLC chassis, galvanised. It's been on this car, 12 years, something like that. As you can see, it's still in excellent condition. Because it's an aftermarket chassis, this back end has this hole which we were going to utilise when we were removing the suspension cylinders. If you were dealing with an original chassis or a copy of an original chassis, like lots of the French ones, which are very popular, this is a solid tube. So to remove this is slightly harder, because you have to undo the front end, like we're going to undo this, and then slide the whole assembly through this eye, which is solid. But anyway, we're lucky. We've got an SLC chassis. Life's good. So, on this tie rod, there's a flat section which is there, which is 9mm, which is a peculiar size, but 9mm nonetheless. Now, if everything's in good nick, and this one's well greased and all the rest of it, you can use a 9mm spanner. If things haven't been touched for a very long time, you're really going to struggle, because they can be exceptionally tight. I know people use mole grips on and things, but for only a few pounds you can buy an adapter sleeve like that, which fits over there. Not very well in this case, but it fits. I'll have to tap it on. Which then allows you to use a decent sized spanner to undo it, which is what we're going to do next. So let me just tap that gently on. It's slightly tighter than it should be, that one, I think, in my humble opinion, but anyway. And then we can use a larger spanner, and there you go. Undoes really easily. As I say, this one has been rebuilt not that long ago. So it's coming undone now, having been tight to go on. So again, there's not much point you watching me unwind this for hours, so I'll turn you off. When I get it out, I'll show you what we got. Right, our rod is undone, as you can see. So the next thing to receive our attention is this. So, rubber boot, which should be on a lot tighter than that, but nonetheless, there it is. Which gives access, certainly easier access to our nuts. Now, the nuts are 46mm. 46mm spanners used to be very, very expensive. So you've got to go looking at auto jumbles and things for the real bargains. I picked that one up by a Turnham. I think that was £2 or £3 at an auto jumble. There is a British spanner which I got free, which is a very close in size. There is of course the large adjustable. That one's by Facom and cost an absolute fortune. And then, if you're doing this as part of a re-chassis, and when the body's off and things, or if things are particularly tight, you need a slogging spanner, which basically slips over, goes in place. It does go in place, believe me, like that, and then you hit it with a hammer to get things moving initially. That's by Beta. Again, that costs an absolute fortune. If you are on a budget, then if you look on eBay, you might see spanners by people like Kennedy. I've had some Kennedy sockets before. I think the quality is good, certainly good for the money you're paying for them. And you can get a 46mm or a pair of 46mm, because you're going to need two, very cheaply. I think you get one for about £12, £13 each, something like that. So if you're on a budget, I'd go looking for either for auto jumble cheapies or the Kennedys, because if you buy proper ones like the Facom and the Beta, there's probably 100 quid's worth there, which is a lot of money. Right, now these again shouldn't be very rusty, I am hoping. Well, I know they're not that rusty, you can tell just by looking at them. Now this job can be more difficult if they are really rusty. As I say, that's when you need that. So, what we need to do is undo that nut fully, which will allow this whole sleeve to pull out this way. Now, you don't need to touch that nut at all really, unless things are really badly rusted, in which case that's the one you can get the slogging spanner on to get things moving. So there's not really much more to say. So we need to try and get that inner one moving if we can, which I'm hoping will be fairly easy, as I say. Maybe not quite as easy as I was hoping. There we go. There we go. Right, now the other thing that happens, which luckily isn't happening here at the minute, is that that nut is rusted solid onto that sleeve, and the sleeve itself is then stuck in the cylinder, in which case it's very hard to get anything moving at all. You've basically just got to use lots and lots of penetrating oil. Sometimes you've got to try and give this a shock, the rubber bung sleeve a shock, hit it with a chisel in that direction, try and free it. Again, lots of penetrating oil in there, and just keep working away at it until it comes free. They all do in the end, or at least all the ones I've done, I've been lucky with, and they've all come free in the end. If things are that bad, there really isn't a shortcut, and you may end up having to put grips on this. Again, we'll see an example of that in episode 2, just to get the twisting motion to get the sleeve out of this. There is really no shortcut to avoid that. You've just got to do what you need to do to get it apart. I'll go through replacing these, prices, all the rest of it in the second video, but for the minute we just want to get this off. So let's keep on screwing. There we go, it's starting to go now. Sorry, I'm at a really funny angle here because I'm trying to keep my head out of the way of the camera, and it's very, very inconvenient. So forgive me if it all looks a bit cat-handed. My apologies. So there we go. Now, eventually you'll run up against the rubber buffer, and that needs to then pull this way a bit so you can get a bit more room. Again, this can be tight, so in fact it's very tight, so you sometimes need to give it a little persuasion to move in this direction, like that. Never use a screwdriver as a chisel or a pry bar. We all know everyone ignores that as well, don't we? So what they should say is never use an expensive screwdriver as a chisel or a pry bar. If it's a cheaper one that's worthless, I've never bothered not doing it. Getting there, bit by bit. I think that's nearly off. Here we are, it is off. So, that sleeve should now slide out like that, which is what you want. And when it's clear, as you can see, the rod lifts out quite cleanly through that slot. So we're going to do exactly the same as I've just done here on the front. Exactly the same. So the way the space is in the garage, I can't show you that without taking everything down, moving all the camera, the lights, etc, etc, etc. And all you'll do is see me do exactly the same thing again. So I'm not going to bother with that. I will do it and then bring you back when I actually physically lift the can out. So I shall turn you off for a second and do the front end. Right, so now we've moved on to the front. I'm taking the front shock absorber off, and it's a lot easier to remove these 3 14mm bolts. a lot easier, I think, than trying to mess about underneath the car. There's not much clearance between the shock absorber mounting stud. So this is the way I always do it anyway. It might be possible the other way, I don't really know. But basically, I'm going to take these three off. Doing it blind now because I can't actually look because I get in front of you. There we go. So I'll bring it back when this is off. So with these three undone, the plate will pivot down. Oh, in fact, I'll show you in a minute. I'll just cut this. So the next thing you'll see will be these off. I'll just cut it in the edit. Right, so there's your plate. There's your shock absorber. It's just held on the front pin. Which is a little tight. There we go. Less so when you line it up square. Right, so that leaves us with exactly the same job as we did on the back, as I mentioned. So I'll do that and then I'll bring you back again. The front sleeve is out, the back sleeve is out. So we just have to line up the rods like that, and like that, and out it comes. So I'll just, before we go any further though, where did I put it? Here. The rear rubber gaiter is an old original Citroen one. It came off no problem. This is a new remanufactured replacement. It was fitted new when this went on. It's done no miles. And when I went to take it off, complete rubbish. Right, anyway, let's look and see what we got. So there's our pot on the floor. Now, I'm going to reuse the sleeves, rubber bungs, nuts, everything, obviously apart from the broken rubber protector. So this is no longer required, so this will go on the bench and we'll find out why it's so tight. And I'll now go and bring over the one we're going to fit temporarily, because I'm going to take this apart and also have another one that I'm overhauling, which is in episode 2. So probably the overhauled one from episode 2 will be the one that ends up going back on the car. So I'll bring the other one over. Right, this is our second-hand replacement tube can, which I paid the princely sum of £12.50 for, which is not dear. I can't find any marks on it indicating front. There should be more details in part 2, but the rods are different lengths, a short one at the front, long one at the back, so I know that's all good. So basically we're going to refit it the way it came off. So we need a rubber bung to go up against the end. We need the inner nut. We need the sleeve. And then we need our little rubber boot. It just needs to be started really. There we go. Obviously, when you're fitting it, the chassis has to fit in between my fingers. So that part has to be on one side, that part on the front side. The reverse on the back. Now, the threads have all been cleaned, ready to go. The threads on the that go into the tie rods ends, eyes, have been greased, well, oiled I should say, cleaned and oiled. Now, there's no point trying to set the ride height until both cans are done, and even then I'll only set it roughly because I need to drive about, make sure everything's moving around properly, make sure it's well settled, and then we'll bring it in and reset the ride height, which will be in a later video. So once again, I need to turn you off and try and arrange some sort of lighting so you can see me refitting this thing. Here we go. Hopefully I won't get in your way very much, but you never know. So, that needs to go up like that. That's that side in. And that's that side in. Nice and easy. Right. Let me see if we can show you a better view of what's going on. So that tube has to go through, back through your nut, back through your rubber bunk, and into that hole. Sometimes it needs a gentle persuasion. There we go. So, close. Right. I think it's being held off because the front one isn't in. The front sleeve isn't in. So I just move the front, I've got to move you, so I'll just slide the front sleeve in and come back and start that nut. To make sure it's level before the nut would start, it has now started. Now I'm not going to tighten those up just yet. I want to try and get this started as well, which can be slightly awkward. Just taking the weight of the loose wheel under my right leg to give myself a better angle of dangle to get at it. Here we go. Now then, I don't know exactly where this needs to sit. As I said, I'll do the heights later. So I'm just going to run it into where I can see the old witness marks and go from there. That'll do for a minute. Now then, I will do exactly the same at the front end, and then we'll talk about these adjuster sleeves. The tie rod's roughly in the right place. The nuts are tightened up pretty much, which brings me to the final bit of the initial installation, which is, if you look in the workshop manual, there are various measurements given for the setting up of these in relation to the cans. Now, I've struggled previously getting figures to come out that look like the workshop manual, to be honest. Now, the rubber buffers are part of the interaction that goes on in the suspension. So basically, the sleeves have got to be tight in relation, the nuts have got to be tight in relation to each other, but with enough movement for the tube in relation to the rubber buffer and that, so that when things are tight, which they should be now, or getting there, let me just make sure that is tight. Yeah, that's tight. Front and back. The rubber buffers are not jammed solid against them. So, well, if everything's done properly and everything's tight, even with it tight, you should still be able to move the suspension pot, which I can. It shouldn't be loose. You should be have to put some effort in to turn it, but turn it nonetheless. Now, frankly, that's the way I've always done it. I'm not suggesting you ignore the workshop manual. By all means, follow the instructions in the workshop manual to get the clearances required in relation to these nuts and buffers, etc., etc., etc. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying this is how I do it. This is how the cans have always been when I've worked on them, that you can just turn them. It works for me. If you're concerned about that, don't do it. Do it exactly by the workshop manual. I'm not telling you to do one thing or another. I'm merely describing how I do this job. So for me, that's fine. So the tie rod's tight into the, well, not tight, but it's adjusted into the eye. Front and back. The nuts are all tight. The sleeves are in the right place. You can just still turn this. So there are two more jobs before we put the shock absorbers on that I think should be done. One is I'm going to get some vegetable oil and get it inside these cylinders to give it a bit of lubrication. You're meant to use castor oil. I haven't got any. I know loads of people that have used veg oil as a substitute. Never had a problem. And in the next video, episode 2, you'll see what's inside the cans and realise that it isn't that critical as long as it's non-mineral oil. And then the other thing is I'll also re-grease the knife edges as they're readily accessible at the minute. So why not? So let's go and find some veg oil. Right, so we have some veg oil, a tube and a funnel. So the end of the tube, unsurprisingly, goes into the open end of our sleeve, into the cylinder. And then a couple of funnelfuls just to get us going. I'll then judge if it needs more once it's been driven about for a little bit, see if it's noisy or not. Right, and then the second thing we have is a mixture of grease and gearbox oil, which I'll brush into the knife edges. You'll see more of the knife edges in the next video when we lay things out and look at the components in particular. So I'll just give them a quick splash now on here. Just work the grease up the side of the arm. In fact, I will show you. I have a spare arm here. So there's the arm. The eye of the tie rod end sits in there, going that way. Your pin goes in there and it clips on either side. And you're trying to get grease down the sides so it lubricates all of the knife edges. They're there, and also the front of the pin where it touches the eye. That's what you're aiming for. Right, so that's it. I need to get underneath and reattach the shock absorbers, which are, as you saw, very quick, very straightforward. I'm going to re-grease all the mounting points to make sure there's correct articulation, because the 2CV relies on that moving about quite a lot. So you don't want them running dry, or they'll start ripping the centre of the bushes out. Or if you've got a particular type of chassis that relies on bolts rather than pins, if they seize, it'll just snap the pin off, which you really don't want. So lots of grease, stick them together, and then we'll move on to the other side. Right, that's them both done. This side, I took the exhaust off. It is theoretically possible to work your way around it, but I took it off because it's easier. I didn't show you that, but everything was exactly the same as on the other side. So let's have a look.